Hello and welcome to Narayana IS. I am Pratik, your faculty for Daily News Analysis. Students, let's start today's DNA with a motivational quote. And what is today's motivational quote? A day without learning is a day wasted. Now, this quote highlights the importance of learning or learning something new. Any day where you learn nothing is a day wasted. So you need to be inquisitive enough to learn some or the other thing on a daily basis. This should be the sort of ambition of your life. Keep on learning, right? Because learning, it unwinds new horizons in your life. That's the reason learning becomes extremely important, right? So as you all know that Narayana is introducing 1 year and 2 year integrated prelims cum mains integrated course. All those students who are interested in enrolling in this 1 year or 2 year can scan the QR code that is visible on your screen, right? Any information that you need, please scan the QR code. Our team will get back to you, right? So if you see, these are the features of our program, right? Extensive coverage of both prelims as well as mains questions with interview mocks as well. So let's begin with the topics of the day. The first topic is taken from Hindu, page number 8. Now in this article we are going to understand the topic budget in detail, but we are going to break down the topic of budget in few parts. So in today's journey, we'll focus only on the basics of budget. We'll understand the basic terminology used in the budget. Then tomorrow, we might come up with another video on budget. So we are going to cover the entire budget in four to five parts, right? The second article is taken from Hindu, page number 1. Now, as the Presidency of America has slapped sanctions against Canada, Mexico, and China, the article highlights the implication of such tariff on the economic, or rather global economic stability. The third article is taken from the Hindu Science, page number 2. Now, given the importance of nuclear energy as highlighted by the finance minister in a budget speech, right, the concept of small modular reactors is gaining traction. So what exactly is this term? We'll understand. And fourth article talks about the subsidies, support from the government received to the fossil fuels like coal, oil. We all know that the entire world is transitioning to renewable sector, but the irony being that the government is supporting the fossil fuel based industries. So what kind of money goes into the fossil fuel sector is something we'll understand in the fourth topic. And finally, the fifth topic, though it is not mentioned here, the fifth topic talks about the citizenship principles and the legal framework. Now we have covered this topic in great detail, right? If you want to understand the principles underlining the concept of citizenship, use soli principle, use sanguinis principle, then I request you to please open the link mentioned in the comment box, right? So these are the 5 topics, or rather 4 topics, that we'll be discussing in today's DNA. Let us start with the first topic, that is about budget, right? So as we discussed in this article, we shall be discussing about budget. Now see, a question has been asked in the year 2011. A question directly on union budget has been asked many times in the UPSC examination. So you should be prepared with this topic on union budget. Now, as we discussed, we are going to break down this topic in 4 or 5 parts. Why? It may be difficult for you to absorb the entire content on budget on one particular day. That's the reason we have will be breaking down this topic in 4 or 5 parts so that you understand the entire budget, right from the basics until the coverage of the budget, right, part by part, so that you develop holistic understanding on the topic or on the topic of union budget. So let us start with the context. We all know that the finance minister on Saturday presented budget. Now in the budget, in her budget speech, she highlighted 4 engines of development, which means if our country is to grow exponentially, then there are 4 primary engines of development. And which are these 4 engines? One, agriculture; the second one, MSMEs; third, investments; and fourth, exports. Now what the government of India has planned in agriculture, MSMEs, exports, we'll discuss one by one. That is, today we'll understand the basics, then tomorrow onwards we'll understand the steps or initiatives taken by the government of India in different sectors such as agriculture, investments, exports. Right? And then the finance minister also highlighted the fact that there are 6 areas where the government intends to bring massive reforms, transformative reforms as we call. And which are the 6 areas? One is taxation, the second one is the power sector, third one is the urban development, fourth one mining, financial sector, and regulatory frameworks. Right? So this is the context, but now we'll understand the basics of union budget. Now, what is a budget? We all make budgets, right? Even if you're a bachelor, you make budgets, which means your father sends you every month XYZ amount, right? XYZ amount, out of which these are your expenses and this will be your savings. So every individual, every family prepares a budget. Likewise, the government of a country also prepares a budget. Which means budget is nothing but a statement. So this is a statement. These will be our expenditure and this will be our income. So this is for expenditure, this is for income. Right? So this is the money that will be requiring for expenditure, and these are the ways through which will generate income. This is nothing but budget. The financial year starts from April 1st and ends on March 31. Financial year starts on April 1 and ends on March 31st. Now, the constitution, we commonly refer the document as budget, but the constitution says that, or the constitution refers the term budget as annual financial statement. Now this statement is very, very important for your prelims examination. So the question may be, the constitution provides the term budget, but does the term budget is provided by the constitution? No. The constitution does not mention about the word budget. The constitution refers the budget as annual financial statement. Very, very important point for your prelims. And this annual financial statement is mentioned in Article 112 of the Indian Constitution. Very important point for your prelims. Now, who prepares a budget? Now, in your family, your father prepares a budget. Similarly, for the country, who makes the laws? Parliament. So it is the Parliament who has the power to prepare budget. right? So the power of parliament to enact a budget is mentioned from articles 112 to 117 of the Indian Constitution. And in Indian parliament, who has the power? The NDA government has a power. Now, so as I told you, budget is a huge document, a very bulky document. So in budget, if you open the budget, you'll find this: estimates of revenue and capital receipts. Now, in the next slide, we'll understand the difference between capital and revenue. Just remember this word receipt, which means income, the incoming money. Receipt is the revenue, that is incoming money. Expenditure is the outgoing money. So, estimates of revenue and capital. How much money will the government raise or earn in a given financial year? Estimate. Second, ways and means to raise revenue. How is the government going to raise revenue? Through taxation, right? It can be by selling a government asset, or the government may borrow from World Bank. Ways to raise revenue. Revenue, receipt, one and the same. Estimates of expenditure. So how much money will the government need to spend? Let's say in agriculture XYZ, finance XYZ, for security, right? Comparison with previous financial year. In the previous financial year, the government must have estimated revenue as well as expenditure. So as compared to the previous financial year, in reality, how much the government earned and how much the government had to spend money. And then fiscal and economic policy of the upcoming year. So in the upcoming year, what are the policies through which the government can benefit, or rather the country can make more money, right, which can propel the economic growth of a country. So this is nothing but budget. So these are the things mentioned in the budget, right? Now, apart from the budget that is presented in the parliament, the finance minister, now this again is very, very important for your prelims, this entire, right? So one, the constitution mandates the finance minister to present certain documents. One, annual financial statement, article 112. Second, demand for grants, which means demand. Every ministry has a demand. Finance ministry says we want 1000 crore. Defense ministry says we want 5000 crore. So every ministry has a demand. This is referred to as demands for grants. Even this document has to be published in parliament. This is what the constitution mandates. Very, very important again for your prelims. Then finance bill. What is finance bill? So finance bill is a bill which is introduced to give effect to the finance proposals. We'll understand about this term in detail when we discuss the stages of passing the budget. As of now, just remember, this is a bill meant to give effect to the finance proposals of the government of India. And then this is what the constitution mandates. Then these are the two statements that this particular act, which act? Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, FRBM Act. The objective of this act is to bring financial discipline within the government, which means the government of India has to be careful when it spends money. It shouldn't be the case that the government is recklessly spending money. The government has to exercise finance or fiscal prudence, maturity in spending money. These are the documents that the finance minister has to publish as per the act. So please remember this points, very important for your prelims examination. Now, who prepares the budget? Again, important for your prelims. Who prepares the budget? It is, see, every ministry has got many departments. It's not just only one ministry. Every ministry has got many departments. So in the finance ministry, we have the department of expenditure that prepares the budget. One. Second, the finance minister, she reads out the budget when? On Feb 1st. Feb 1st was on Saturday, right? And third, it the budget that the finance minister presents in parliament has to be approved when? By March 31. Why? Because because the financial year starts from when? April 1, which means within 2 months, Feb and March, the government has to ensure that the budget is passed in the parliament. Now, what do you mean by passing the budget? We'll explain. I'll explain in some time. See, now until 2017, the Indian government had two budgets, which means we used to present two different types of budget. One is the general budget followed by railway budget. But in 2017, general budget and railway budgets were merged. And now we only present one budget, that is the general budget. The reason why we presented, or the presentation of railway budget and general budget, it dates back to the British times. Now the reason why we used to back then during the British times present railway budget different or in a different manner is because of the revenue the railway ministry used to generate, which means the revenue of the railway ministry was much more than the general budget. So to not disturb the math or economy of railway ministry, railway budget was presented differently or separately. But now, as the revenue of railway budget or railways has shrunk considerably, that's the reason railway and general budgets both have been merged. And when? 2017. Now, why is budget important? Budget is important for economic governance. To govern is the job of the government. To govern what? When it comes to budget, economic governance, which means to it, the budget reflects the government's financial health. If the health is in a good shape, which means if the government has more surplus or more deficit, so the budget reflects government's fiscal health. Then it informs the citizens. When the finance minister reads the budget, it informs it informs the citizens what? How much money the government raised in the previous year. So in the budget speech, the estimate is announced. But here, how much money the government earned in the last year or raised last year, where the money was spent, how much government had to borrow. So to meet the requirements, how much money the government had to borrow from the external sources. And then what are the projections of revenue for this year, how much the government will earn, how much the government will spend. And this all is done for what? To ensure transparency and accountability. So to ensure transparency and accountability in finance management, which means people should know how much money the government is raising and how much money the government is spending. If there are wastage in expenditure, or there are any loopholes that we can plug, right? So this is done to ensure transparency and accountability. Now, now we'll understand the stages of passing the budget. There are 6 stages. How many? 6 stages of passing the budget. The first, the first is presentation of the budget. Presentation, which means on Feb 1st every year, the finance minister presents the budget. This is referred to as budget speech. Right? Now, this after reading out the budget is placed before both Lok Sabha as well as Rajya Sabha. So, first stage is nothing but just the document of budget is presented in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. And when the finance minister reads out the budget, the finance minister highlights the economic policies of the government, the financial allocations, which minister is getting how much money, and the major reforms the government intends to carry out in the financial year. So, first is only presentation of budget. Second, general discussion. Now, if you see today, right, there's a discussion going on in the parliament about budget. Now, general discussion is held, right? Now, here we know that every ministry demands certain amount from the government. We want this much money for our expenses. Now, here it's written that no cut motion or voting is allowed. Only it is discussed. The opposition cannot say that the home minister is demanding more money. Reduce the amount. No. Only the principle underlying the budget or underlying the economic policy is discussed. General discussion is done only. Because the parliamentarians, they do not have the knowledge of, let's say, not every parliamentarian has a knowledge about finance, economy. Only general discussion is held. Now, once the general discussion is held, the house is adjourned, which means the speaker and the chairman tells the house, now you are on leave for 2 to 3 weeks. Please go home for 2 to 3 weeks. Why? Because now the real examination of the budget is done by whom? By the department related standing committees. This is the third stage. This department related standing committees, they examine the details of the budget. So we discuss what is budget. Every ministry demands certain amount. Economic policies are laid down. Now this standing committee, which has experts in the field of economy, they examine the details of the bill. They examine the details of the bill. So they examine and then they present a report to the parliament. So it takes almost 3 to 4 weeks, right? 3 to 4 weeks the time given to the committees. They examine each and every clause of the bill, prepare a report and submit to the parliament. This is the third stage. Fourth stage. Now, based on the report of the department related standing committees, the voting is done. Voting for what? Home Ministry says that I need 5,000 crores. Now, this demand has to be voted in the Lok Sabha. Now, please remember, only Lok Sabha has the privilege to vote on demands for grants. Rajya Sabha can only discuss it, cannot vote. Why? Because people or MPs in Rajya Sabha are not voted directly by the people. MPs in Lok Sabha are directly voted by the people. So, this is what you need to understand. Very, very important point for your presence. Voting on demand for grants is the exclusive privilege of the Lok Sabha. Rajya Sabha cannot vote it. Please mark down this point for prelims. Very important point. So, Home Ministry says that we want 5,000 crores. Now, this demand has to be voted, has to be passed in the Lok Sabha. Only then the Home Ministry gets 5,000 crores. And Lok Sabha, it consists of both the government as well as the opposition. Right? Now, here in the fourth stage, Congress is in opposition. The Congress may say that, look, the Defense Ministry is proposing more money. So, please reduce the demand of the Defense Ministry. they are asking 10,000 crores. This is not the amount they require. Please reduce down to, let's say, so there are various types of cut motions again. That is a part of polity. We'll discuss in detail in polity. So in this stage, the opposition can also request to reduce the demand of the ministry. And voting is done only in Lok Sabha. Now these are the last two stages. See, appropriation and finance bill. Now the government cannot spend any money without seeking the approval of the parliament. And how the approval is sought? By voting. Which means for every rupee the government spends, the government has to get the approval from the parliament. This is referred to as appropriation bill, which means the government has to pass appropriation bill. Only when the government passes appropriation bill, the government can spend money. Now, of course, the government has support in the Lok Sabha, so the bills usually get passed. That's the reason they have formed the government, right? NDA is in government. Why? Because they have the majority in Lok Sabha. So usually the bills get passed. So no money can be withdrawn without parliament support. Only when this bill is passed, the government can spend money. So this is about the outgoing money. What about the incoming money? Even for the finance proposals of the government has to seek permission. For example, let's say the government wants to impose income taxes or income tax for people who earn 3 lakhs. Now this is a proposal. This has to get passed in the parliament. So the finance bill is introduced to implement the government's tax proposals. So in order to give effect to the finance proposals, the finance bill is passed. So once the finance bill is passed, the money comes in the account. Appropriation bill, the money goes out. And this is how all the 6 stages of the passing of budget gets completed. I hope you understood the 6 stages. 1, presentation. 2nd, general discussion. 3rd, department related standing committees. 4th, voting on demand for grants. 5th, appropriation bill. 6th, finance bill. 6 stages of passing of the budget. Now, earlier we discussed, right, there are 2 types of, or the budget comprises 2 sections. 1, incoming money. 2nd, outgoing money. Incoming money is referred to as receipts. Outgoing, expenditure. Now, we'll talk about the receipts first. In receipts, that is incoming money. So, receipts and expenditure. Receipts are of 2 types: revenue and capital receipts. And this one, expenditure, again revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. So we'll understand revenue receipts. So this is very important for you to understand the difference between revenue receipt, revenue expenditure, capital receipt, capital expenditure, because this difference can be asked in the prelims examination. UPSC has asked question previously, so you need to understand the difference. So what are revenue receipts? Non-repayable, which means the government doesn't have to repay this amount to someone. So receipt, incoming, please keep this thing in your mind. Receipt is incoming. Now they are primarily composed of tax revenue. So the income tax the citizens pay, the government collects it. The government doesn't have to pay that amount to anyone. Non-tax revenues, for example, when the government, government earns from the government services, government is offering some services, let's say road. Now the government is collecting toll. So this again is not creating any liability. So one thing that you need to remember is that revenue receipts do not create any liability for the government, do not create any burden for the government. So the income that I am earning is not a liability. Why? Because I can do whatever with my money. Similarly, same is the case with the government. It does not create liability. What? The revenue receipts. Right? Then interest on loans. The government gives loans to states or let's say some other country. Interest that the government get from the loan, again part of revenue receipts. Fees and fines. Proceeds from disinvestment. Let's say for example the government is selling some let's say uh, stocks of let's say PSUs, reducing its share of ownership in a PSU. So the government owns let's say 90%, and the government wants to reduce from 90% to 60%. So the government is selling 30% stocks. The government is getting money, revenue receipts. Now we'll understand capital receipts. It involves two-way transaction, which means the money received by the government will either generate income in the future or can be recovered later. It's a two-way transaction. How? Capital receipts arise from recovery of loans. Let's say the government has given loan to Nepal. Now the government is getting the loan amount back. Or raising new loans. Now the government is raising new loan from World Bank or let's say America. So the government is getting money, receipts. Revenue receipts, it does not create liability. This creates liability, may create liability, right? Disposal of permanent assets, that is the government is selling a land. Now government is getting money, revenue, capital receipts. So we understood receipts, incoming money. Now the expenditure. Again revenue expenditure, capital expenditure. Difference: expenses incurred for day-to-day operations. For example, the government pays salaries to the employees. Spending money, part of revenue expenditure, right? They do not create assets or generate, they are not creating any assets or generating revenue. Salaries of government employees. Capital receipts, they are creating assets. Now let's say the government is spending money to build a highway, but this highway will boost the Indian economy, will reduce the transportation cost, will reduce the fuel expenses, will increase the purchasing power capacity of people. So the government should focus more on capital expenditure. That's the reason they say capital expenditure is important. For example, building infrastructure, roads, railways, acquiring defense equipment, investing in public enterprises. This is capital expenditure, right? Now, we'll also understand, we understood the difference between receipts and expenditure. Now we'll understand deficits, the types of deficits. Now this you have to simply, I know it may be confusing, but the only solution is to by heart the definition. Budget deficit. In short, the total expenditure minus total receipts is nothing but budget deficit. Revenue deficit, we understood what is revenue receipt expenditure. Revenue expenditure minus revenue receipts. So very simple. Effective revenue deficit. So we understood what is revenue deficit minus grants in aid, that is the help provided by the government for capital assets like roads, highways. Fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit is the same as that of budget deficit, but only in fiscal deficit borrowings, that the government borrows money from someone else, that is excluded. Expenditure minus receipts except borrowing. Borrowing part is not included. Primary deficit, fiscal deficit, we understood what is fiscal deficit minus interest payment. The interest that the government pays for the loan the government takes from, let's say, the external sources. Monetized deficit. So if I don't have money, what do? Similarly, when the government does not have money, it goes borrowings from RBI. Plus drawdown of government balance. Now I have balance in the government with the bank. That's the reason I'm going to the bank. So drawdown of government balance, which means from the when I don't have money, either I can go to the bank and from my balance I can take money, and if I don't have money, I can borrow loan from the bank. Same is the monetized deficit, right? Now the tax system, two types of taxes. One is direct, the second one is indirect. What is direct? Directly collected from individuals and business people. And who administers it? The Central Board of Direct Taxes, right? And example, income tax, corporate tax, the business people, and the trading, the share market trading that you do, and the profit that you generate out of the trading, you have to pay STT, that is security transaction tax. Indirect taxes, it's applied to goods and services. I am buying this smart board from a shop. I am paying money to the shopkeeper, but the indirect tax is also involved. I pay money to the shopkeeper is paying money to the government, indirect tax. Custom duty. Let's say I'm importing a imported car, so I have to pay custom duty. Excise duty, manufactured goods. so, so excise duty is paid on the manufactured goods. This are the difference between direct and indirect taxes, right? I hope you understood the difference between, or rather the basics of the term budget. So if you understood all the basic concepts of the budget, you will understand the initiatives the government of India has taken in different sectors. The first and foremost part is to understand the basics of budget. I hope you understood each and every part, every basic part uh, with respect to the topic budget. Any questions, please ask in the comment box, right? Now, second topic. What is the title of the second topic? Trump slaps tariffs, right? Now, this part is important for GS paper 2, that is the implication of the policies taken by the developed countries on the developing countries. Now, this is a question asked in the year 2018, right? How would the recent phenomena of protectionism, what Trump has done is nothing but protectionism, and currency manipulations in world trade affect macroeconomic stability? So, now in simple words, you'll understand what the topic is all about. See, the American president has imposed tariffs. Tariffs on what? Goods. Goods, that is the manufactured goods, on three countries: Mexico, Canada, and China. Which means, let's say, this is America, this is America, this is Canada, Mexico, and China. Let's say China is exporting chips to America. Mexico is exporting oil, and Canada is exporting, let's say, iPhone. Now, what the president of America has done is impose tariff on the imported goods, which means, let's say, if one iPhone is costing, let's say, 100 rupees, now impose taxes on 100 rupees. Because the taxes, 100 rupees becomes 150 rupees. Oil, one barrel oil, let's say, $85, one barrel. Because of the tariff, it's going out to be, it's increasing to 95, which means this is referred to as tariff or taxes, which means now the imported goods is becoming costly in America. America wants that people in America should buy from the American manufacturers. So let's say, for example, if let's say iPhone, if America is getting iPhone cheaper from Canada, which means that the American company that manufactures iPhone, they have to lay off people, terminate people. Why? Because people are buying iPhones from Canada. Terminating which means unemployment. The government will be under pressure. So Trump says that buy from America, and Trump is helping the domestic manufacturers. So this is the context. Now, how much tariffs the government has imposed is not important. It is important to understand the implication, impact of such tariffs. We'll understand that part. First is market volatility. The market gets disturbed. How? Let's say, for example, now as Canada is importing more and more iPhones to America and other countries, which means the economy of Canada is growing. The investors are investing in the economy of Canada. Why? Because the economy is getting a boost, right? And at the same time, people are benefiting from buying iPhones from Canada, right? Now, all of a sudden, Trump has imposed tariff, which means now things are getting costly in America, which means that the sales of iPhones from Canada will decrease. If the sales are decreased, which means the manufacturer in Canada has to lay off people, unemployment. This is how the market gets disturbed. And as the value of dollar increases, American dollar increases, the value of other currencies such as Canadian dollar, Australian dollar, the Mexican peso, they depreciate. Why? See, the currency gets appreciate. The currency appreciates when you're exporting more. When India exports more and more, the currency appreciates. But now because of the tariffs, the export reduces and so the currency depreciates. Second, inflationary pressures. Now the American people have to spend more money to buy an iPhone from Canada. Inflation going up. Impact of tariffs. Supply chain disruption. See, Mexico, America and Canada, neighboring countries, they signed an agreement named US Mexico Canada Agreement. Now, because of the tariffs, this agreement will face disruption. See, what is supply chain? Supply chain, which means, let's say, this is, let's say, China, or let's say Canada. This is Canada. Now, Canada is making an iPhone, but now Canada is actually importing the raw material from one country, two country, three country plus D country. Now, out of let's say these four countries, Ukraine is one country. Now, because of Russia-Ukraine war, Canada is not getting the raw materials, and plus America has imposed tariffs on the Canadian iPhones. This is how the supply chain gets disrupted. Right? Global trade tensions. So now as America has imposed sanctions, what Canada and Mexico have done, they have imposed retaliatory measures against on America, which means Canada and Mexico have said, okay, if America is going to do or rather impose tariffs, we'll also impose tariffs on the imports from America, which means here you can see that the trade war may worsen. More and more countries will be part of trade war and they will focus on protectionism, that is focusing on their local economy, domestic economy. But we are living in a world of globalization. Globalization, which means that the world is interconnected. You cannot see yourself in isolation. You have to compete in the market to ensure the competitiveness of your manufactured goods. Protectionism is not a solution. Why? Because now the American people have to pay more to buy an iPhone from Canada. Who is at loss? American people. Yes, of course, the American people, or rather the companies in America, will start manufacturing iPhone. May take time, but at least in the short run, the American people have to spend more money. These are the implications. What about India? Now, such protectionist measure or the decision of America may or may not impact. Now, it can also impact India in a positive way. How? The companies that were stationed in Canada or Mexico may relocate to India. Why? Because India and America have good trade relations. So, one potential benefit that India can see is the companies coming to India to set up their manufacturing plants. Second, supply chain realignments, which means same. Yeah, so they can shift they or relocate the manufacturing bases from Canada and Mexico to India. And now the trade diversion opportunities. Now, as America has lost the source market, that is Canada and Mexico, what America can do is they can import from countries like India with whom they have good trade relations, or the trade agreements between both the countries are favorable to both the countries, which means now the exports from India may increase to US, right? But if I talk about the negative impact, now let's say for example oil may get more and more expensive, metals like gold and silver, because of the tariffs imposed by America. The tariff, or rather the prices of commodities, may increase, which means India has to buy more expensive oil or let's say metals. By and large, the Indian government is against such protectionist measures. Even India does not advocate protectionism. We are living in a hyper connected, or rather uh, globalized community. Connected, we are connected, so we are living in globalization era. So we cannot see things in isolation, right? So this will be the impact on, let's say, the economic stability, global economic stability, or rather India. I hope you understood the impact of tariffs on the global economic stability. This is the second topic. Now we'll understand third topic. Now, see, in the recently announced budget, the finance minister highlighted the importance of nuclear energy, which means given the fact that India is moving towards renewable sources, the finance minister highlighted the importance of nuclear energy. Now, as the nuclear energy concept, or rather the nuclear energy importance, the importance of nuclear energy is growing, right? The concept of small modular reactor is also gaining traction. Small modular reactors is gaining traction. So what exactly is this? We'll understand. First, we'll understand what is nuclear energy. Now, nuclear energy is nothing but energy. This energy is released from what? From the nucleus of atoms. Now, this energy is released from the atoms, right? There are two ways. One is fission, the other one is fusion. As of now, the nuclear energy is produced by way of nuclear fission. What is fission? Fission, which means a heavier nucleus gets split into lighter nucleus. So this is nucleus. this getting split, energy generated. This is referred to as fission. Fusion, when the nucleus of two atoms they fuse together. This is referred to as nuclear fusion, right? So in the sun, the phenomena that we experience is nothing but nuclear fusion, right? I hope you understood what is nuclear energy. Now, what are nuclear reactors? Nuclear reactors, what is it? It's a reactor, which means it's a machine where the chain reactions occur. What? The nuclear chain the nuclear chain reactions occur. How is the nuclear energy produced? Through nuclear chain reaction, right? And reactor is nothing but, now reactors they operate on the principle of nuclear fission. Fission of what? Which atoms? Uranium 235 and plutonium 239. Please remember this. So fission, a nucleus gets split into smaller nuclei. And then this energy, because of the reaction, the energy that is produced is used to heat water. Heating water, which means it produces steam, and this steam is used to drive or run the turbine. And as the turbine moves, the energy is generated. So reactor is required for the chain reaction. Now the small modular reactors, they are advanced nuclear reactors, but it has less energy capacity of only 300 megawatt. Now we'll understand the difference. See, the traditional nuclear reactors, we are talking about the advanced, which is nothing but the small modular reactor. We'll understand the difference. Traditional nuclear reactors, it produces more than 100 megawatt. The small modular reactor, less than 300 megawatt. But it takes 15 years for the manufacturing of one reactor. This one, just 2 to 5 years, that's it. Deployment fixed location, which means you cannot move it. It's fixed. This one can be transported and installed anywhere. The potential benefits. Active cooling system. Now the active cooling system has a higher risk. This has a passive cooling system, so the risk is also low. Fixed capacity can be scaled up by adding more and more units, which means you can add more and more reactors and increase the capacity of nuclear or energy generation. Initial cost, it's billions of dollars. Comparatively, the cost is very less for this small modular reaction. Refueling, as it's a huge reactor, refueling is less required, but this requires more and more refueling, which means you need more and more energy. Waste, both of them, it generates waste, but this one generates more waste, this one less waste. See, this concept is new. The world is yet to check the economic feasibility of this small modular reactor. Also, because of small modular reactor, there will be high fuel demand. Why? More and more energy is required for what? Refueling purpose. Nuclear waste management, though it is less, but still waste generation is waste generation. And regulatory hurdles. India is yet to come up with a regulatory mechanism for small modular reactor. I hope you understood the third article. Now let's understand the fourth article. We know that we are moving towards renewable sources, wind energy, solar energy, nuclear energy. But the irony is that the governments of majority of the countries are supporting fossil fuel based industries. This is an irony, paradox. On one end, you say that okay, we want to focus, or the world should focus on renewable sector, but on the other hand, the government is actually supporting the fossil fuel based industries. It's an irony. Now, what are fossil fuels? They are energy sources, right? And uh, they are formed how? From the remnants of dead plants and animals. Now, this dead plants and animals for thousands of years they get stored and then gradually the energy is released. Which are the types of fossil fuels? Oil, gas, coal. These are the examples of fossil fuels. Now, they are widely used for what? Electricity generation, coal, transportation, oil, and then industrial activities, right? But they also, we know that it releases high amounts of carbon emissions. Now, fossil fuel subsidies, which means the government actually, for example, let's say I am I own a company that is in the business of mining coal. Because I have to mine coal, I have to transport coal, then the electricity generators, they use the coal for the generation of electricity. Now there's a cost involved. The government says to me, don't worry about the cost, I'll give you some subsidy, some help from my side. Why? Because let's say if I mine coal, which is expensive, if a transportation involves cost, production of electricity involves cost, which means the final cost of electricity per unit will be more. So government says, okay, don't worry, you sell the coal at less price, I'll give you support. So here the government is providing subsidy for mining, transportation as well as for electricity generation, which means the per cost electricity should come down. This happens in almost majority of the countries. Support provided by the government to make fossil fuels cheaper for both producers and the end user is the consumer. Why? Lower production cost, right? Lower production cost, which means if I sell the coal at less price, the per cost electricity will be less, the consumers will benefit, so the government provides support, right? And reduce consumer price, we discussed. Now, which are the types of fossil fuel? Production subsidies, consumption, foregone, climate change. Now, this is not required, right? This is not required to remember. Now, see this chart. Global explicit consumption subsidies for fossil fuels from 2010 onwards 2023. So 10. Look at the subsidies. From 10 in the year 2022, the subsidies amounted to $1.18 trillion. In 2010, it was just 400 or 450 billions. Look at the scale of support provided by the government to the fossil fuel based industries. So the number again is not important, right? The number is not important. So which are the major oil producers? Saudi Arabia, Turkestan, Libya, Algeria, Iran, right? In India, per capita subsidy is $53 per person. Now, what are the implications? Environmental impact, right? Which means it leads to pollution, climate change, and the environment degrade or degenerates. Then the second one we have, economic burden. It puts pressure on the government budgets. Now, instead of investing in healthcare, education, which are productive sectors, the government is forced to invest in the fossil fuels. Market distortion. Now, as the government is providing support to the fossil fuels, it is actually detracting or diverting the attention from the renewable sector, right? It makes fossil fuels artificially cheaper, which means more and more people will invest in the fossil fuels. The need is to invest in the renewable sector. Social inequity, again, beat oil, beat electricity. Who consumes more? The wealthy people. The wealthier people or the wealthy people are the ones who maximize majority of, let's say, the oil, or let's say the coal, electricity or fuel. So what should be the approach? Simple. You should cut support to the producers. You should reduce the investment in fossil fuels and increase the investments, or rather give subsidies to the producers in the renewable sector. Reform tax policies and make the tax policies so as to benefit the renewable sector, because the ultimate objective is to promote clean energy. Right? I hope you understood the fourth topic as well. So these are the four topics that we discussed in today's DNA. The fifth article on the principles related to citizenship. Please open the link in the comment box. You can read the article. Also watch the video in which we have explained the principles underlining the concept of citizenship. Now let us discuss the questions from yesterday's DNA. The Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 provides legal protection to wildlife, making hunting illegal and establishing protected areas for species conservation. Yes, this statement is correct. Project Tiger was launched in 1983 and focuses solely on the protection of tigers. No, it was launched in the year 1973. Project Tiger provides financial and technical support to local authorities for managing. Yes, 1 and 3, option C is the correct answer for this particular question. Next, microplastics are tiny plastics particles up to 50, no, 5 mm. They are biodegradable, no, they are non-biodegradable. How can microplastics be biodegradable? The extended producer responsibility was mandated in plastic. Yes, this one is correct, which means only C is the correct answer. Right? Now, these are the questions from today's GNA 1, 2, 3 and 4. So I request you to please attempt the questions. The link of DNA quiz is mentioned in the comment box. Open the quiz, attempt the questions and post your score in the comment box. Right? On this note, we end today's DNA. I hope you have understood each and every topic. Any topic, any concept, if you're not understood, I request you to please ask in the comment section. On this note, I'll call it a wrap. Thank you so much for watching DNA.